In the quiet alleys of Kyoto and the hurried sidewalks of Tokyo, a new kind of tension is beginning to spread. It's no longer just the curious glances of tourists that are bothersome. It's the jostling in subway stations, the selfies in sacred places, and the streets clogged with people that seem to have become the trigger for a growing unease. Japan, that country known for its refined hospitality and exemplary education, is beginning to raise signs in the streets saying, "We can't take it anymore." And that's not an exaggeration. In several cities, the population has taken to the streets in protest against mass tourism and immigration, in a turnaround that few could have imagined a few years ago. The noise doesn't just come from camera flashes. It comes from the increase in crimes attributed to visitors, the feeling of disrespect for social rules, and the overload on basic services. The problem isn't with everyone, of course, but the volume of cases has made headlines. Residents report daily annoyances, such as tourists blocking sidewalks to film videos or behaving inappropriately in places of worship and public transport. Small but constant infractions that, in a country obsessed with order and collective respect, end up generating friction that accumulates silently until someone explodes. And in this case, exploded in the streets. In cities like Nara, the increase in visitors has even resulted in problems with the local deer, a tourist symbol of the region. The animals, once peaceful, have begun to attack due to stress, improper feeding, or being forced into selfies by unprepared tourists. It's symbolic. Even the fauna is feeling the effects of overexposure. For many Japanese, this new phase seems like a profound imbalance between the desire to attract the world and the need to preserve their own inner peace. A conflict that, for a people so protective of their culture, is beginning to weigh like a silent invasion. And it's not just about holiday tourism. The discussion has broadened to include the flow of immigrants. Japan, which historically has always had a strict immigration policy, has begun to slowly open its doors. But the increase in foreigners in local communities is generating real discomfort, especially when these groups are unable to integrate or do not understand the country's social rules. This has fueled increasingly heated discussions, both in the media and in conversations among those who have always lived there and feel the neighborhood changing without knowing if they are prepared for it. Posters calling for an end to mass immigration and for the protection of Japanese identity have begun to appear more frequently. The phrase "Japan first" is no longer restricted to radical niches on the internet, but is spreading in public debates and even in election campaigns. The idea that Japan is losing its essence has become a collective cry for those who feel threatened by the changes. In many neighborhoods, especially the more traditional ones, the mere presence of excessive English signs is already seen as a sign of loss of character. It is a silent but persistent cultural resistance. Social media, as always, amplifies everything. Videos of tourists making gaffes or immigrants in controversial situations easily go viral and further fuel the idea that there is a foreign problem to be contained. Of course, this generates distortions and exaggerations. Not everything seen online is the rule, but the emotional impact of this content is strong. And in times of uncertainty, where the past seems more comfortable than the present, these images act like matches thrown into a dry field. The feeling of loss of control grows. Newspapers and experts are trying to calm the situation, explaining the economic benefits of tourism and controlled immigration. But in reality, where 70-year-old women can no longer walk peacefully down the street because of the crowds of backpackers, the technical discourse doesn't hold water. Perception is what counts, and the perception is one of invasion. Even public officials have begun to question whether the country is prepared for this level of openness, especially without adequate social and cultural infrastructure to absorb so many foreigners at once. The most curious thing is that this rejection movement is happening right after Japan broke historical visitor records. In 2024, there were more than 30 million tourists, a gigantic number for a country with a dense urban structure and full of rules. But this success has become a poisoned gift. The economy profits, but the average citizen feels they are paying the price with their quality of life. And when people start questioning whether it's worth continuing to receive well, it's a sign that the crack has already become a hole. Amidst this whirlwind of protests against tourists and immigrants, there's a deeper root that many people forget to look at. Japan is becoming depopulated. Literally. The demographic crisis there is frightening and silent. The birth rate is among the lowest in the world, while life expectancy is one of the highest. This means there are far more elderly people than young people. And when new people aren't born to fill the spaces left by the older generation, everything starts to grind to a halt, from factory production to the operation of a simple neighborhood restaurant. The machine stops running, and this is happening now, in front of everyone. To try and avoid collapse, the Japanese government did something that would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. It opened, albeit timidly, the doors to immigration. Specific programs emerged, such as the Tokutei Ginou, which allows the entry of foreign workers into sectors desperately lacking labor: construction, agriculture, elderly care, and so on. The idea was to bring in people willing to do jobs that the Japanese no longer want, or simply don't have enough of to perform. It was a rational solution, but economic rationality doesn't always align with popular sentiment. The arrival of thousands of foreigners generated an immediate shock. In 2024, the country broke a record: 360,000 new arrivals. For those living in large centers like Tokyo or Osaka, this change may even go unnoticed in the crowd. But in medium and small cities, where everyone knows each other and the routine is more traditional, the presence of foreign workers was striking and, in many cases, bothersome. After all, there are different languages, distinct eating habits, diverse religions, and forms of behavior that challenge the invisible code of Japanese social etiquette. It's not that foreigners do anything wrong, but the simple fact that they don't know what is considered right there is enough to generate friction, and tourism exploded along with this wave. After the pandemic, Japan became one of the most desired destinations in the world. In 2024, more than 30 million visitors entered the country, an avalanche. Hotels, temples, shopping malls, and tourist attractions were packed like never before. For the economy, it was a blessing. For the people, it was exhausting. Japan is a country that values silence, personal space, and discipline on public transport. Imagine how all of this is affected when there are crowds of people talking loudly, taking selfies everywhere, and disregarding basic rules like no eating while walking in the street. However, the biggest problem may not be the sheer number of people, but rather the lack of preparedness in dealing with them. Japan opened its doors to protect its economy, but failed to create a robust structure to integrate these foreigners. Many workers live in precarious conditions, with low wages, exhausting workdays, and very few opportunities for advancement. This creates an invisible layer of inequality that further fuels prejudice. Part of the population feels that foreigners only come to take what is ours, while the immigrants themselves feel they will never truly be accepted. An invisible wall rises in the midst of this attempt at adaptation. Meanwhile, schools are beginning to grapple with the children of immigrants who don't speak Japanese. Hospitals are seeing increased demand. The rental market is booming in some areas with the sudden arrival of new residents. And the average citizen is starting to wonder if all this openness is being planned, or if the government is just postponing the problem. This doubt, mixed with fear of the unknown, creates fertile ground for nationalist rhetoric, which is gaining strength through word of mouth, on social media, and eventually, at the ballot box. It's worth remembering that Japan has always been a country with very well-defined symbolic borders. Even when the rest of the world was more closed off, Japan stood out for its isolation, the famous era. Sakokuet lasted for more than 2 centuries. The idea was clear: to keep Japanese culture pure without external influences. This history makes the current opening seem, to many, like a break with the national essence. Immigration in this context is not just a practical movement. It is seen by some as a direct threat to what it means to be Japanese. And this view, even if not dominant, has gained traction in recent years. But while this rejection grows, the numbers paint a clear warning. If Japan doesn't find a smart way to attract and integrate new workers, the country risks grinding to a halt. In some rural areas, there are already more abandoned houses than inhabited ones. In certain industrial sectors, there are vacancies and no one to fill them. The country finds itself trapped between 2 worlds: the proud and closed world of the past and the world of the future, which demands ever greater openness. And this dilemma becomes increasingly visible with each new arrival, each new protest, each new election. When social tension finds a vacuum in politics, something inevitable happens. New voices emerge, willing to fill that void. And that's exactly what happened in Japan in recent years. A party that few took seriously, called Saneito, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, led by a former conservative YouTuber named Sore Kamiya, who became famous for criticizing globalism, immigration, and even vaccines. Suddenly, this guy started drawing crowds, especially among younger people and those disillusioned with the traditional system. In 2024, the party emerged from anonymity and secured 14 seats in the Senate. The message? Japan is tired, distrustful, and looking for alternatives, however radical they may seem. Saneito's speech is direct and full of impactful phrases. Japan first. Protect our culture. Stop the foreign invasion. Sounds familiar, right? It's very similar to what we saw in the United States with Trump, and in Europe with various ultranationalist movements. But Japan has its own particularities. There, this type of rhetoric finds fertile ground not only out of fear of immigration, but also out of nostalgia for a more homogeneous country, where everyone spoke the same language, followed the same code of conduct, and respected the same silent routine. The problem is that this version of the country may no longer exist. The party's growth raised alarm bells among the major traditional parties, such as the Liberal Democrats, who had dominated politics for decades. To avoid losing ground, many began to adopt a tougher stance on immigration and tourism issues as well. This created a ripple effect. What was once seen as extremist rhetoric began to become central to the debate. Suddenly, expelling undocumented immigrants, limiting visas, and blocking multicultural projects ceased to be taboo. Even conservative newspapers began to treat the issue as a legitimate matter of national interest. Meanwhile, social media did what it does best: spread videos, memes, and panic. Every day a new clip emerged of foreigners supposedly committing crimes, disrespecting rules, or stealing jobs. Some of these videos were manipulated, others completely out of context. But by then, nobody stopped to check. The feeling of invasion grew, fueled by algorithms and inflammatory rhetoric. It's that thing. When emotion speaks louder than facts, reality becomes a battlefield of narratives. Saneito understood this very well. They took advantage of the climate to further expand their reach. They launched local candidates. Influencers began repeating the same slogans. And suddenly, a significant portion of the Japanese population saw themselves represented by this new group. A curious detail is that the party didn't just use traditional politics. They used TikTok, YouTube, live streams. They spoke the language of ordinary people, unlike the suited politicians in parliament. It was all very emotional, direct, and above all, viral. Tension became fuel. Everything that happened in the country was reinterpreted through this lens of the foreign threat. If inflation rose, it was blamed on migratory pressure. If hospitals were overcrowded, it was the immigrants. If a crime caught attention on TV, it was enough for the suspect not to be Japanese to become a trending topic. This simplification of problems transformed Saneito into a machine for capturing indignation. And when you give a name and face to a diffuse feeling of discomfort, you create a clear enemy. This mobilizes. This gets people elected. The most frightening thing is that, little by little, the discourse began to change even the way Japanese people interacted in their daily lives. Many foreigners began to report suspicious glances, discrimination in shops and restaurants, and even verbal attacks. Small far-right groups gained the courage to speak out openly, something rare until recently. What was once restrained by social shame now seemed to have political backing. The rejection gained clothing, a flag, and airtime for propaganda. The protests, which were previously localized and sporadic, began to take on national proportions between the end of 2024 and the first half of 2025. It was as if the entire country had woken up with the same anguish in its chest and needed to let it out. Posters with phrases like "Out with the invaders" and "Protect Japan" spread throughout Tokyo, Osaka, Saitama, and other cities that until then had been symbols of order and discretion. But this time, there was no more silence. There were horns, shouts, crowds. The silent Japan was now shouting, and the target was foreigners. Even historically marginalized ethnic groups, such as the Kurds, became scapegoats in neighborhoods where tension exploded without warning. The trigger for all this organized anger was a viral video. A foreign streamer assaulted an elderly Japanese man in public and broadcast it live. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Within hours, social media exploded with outrage, and the video became a symbol of everything that was wrong. The message was clear: we are losing control. And this feeling of loss of control wasn't limited to the general population. It hit the government hard, which had already been under pressure from radical parties and public opinion. It was time to react, or at least, to pretend to react. The answer came in the form of a call, zero Plan A package of harsh measures that promised to restore order. The plan included accelerated deportations, severe restrictions on the granting of new visas, and even a requirement of 6 times the capital for foreigners wishing to open businesses in the country. The idea was to filter out who truly deserved to stay. But like any measure taken in the heat of the moment, the plan inflamed passions more than it calmed them. While some applauded, others shouted condemnation and regression. Prime Minister Iba, who had previously seemed firm, saw his popularity melt like snow on summer asphalt. The problem was that the government was trying to resolve a deep wound with a hasty band-aid. The streets weren't just demanding deportations, they were demanding a national repositioning. And this pressure wasn't just coming from the base. Inside Parliament, the debate became more heated than ever. The opposition accused the government of giving in to xenophobia, while more conservative sectors said it was being too lenient. It was like watching a rope being pulled from both sides, about to snap in the middle. The issue of immigration, which for decades had been treated with care and silence, became the center of attention, from politics to talk shows. The practical impact was immediate. Many foreigners who were already living legally in the country began to feel threatened. Immigrant business owners closed their shops for fear of attacks. Students stopped attending classes. Even tourists began reporting uncomfortable situations at airports, hotels, and restaurants. Distrust had become the norm, and when a country begins to look with hostility towards those who come from abroad, the reaction is instantaneous. The world begins to look back, but with distrust as well. Japan, which until yesterday was a model of tourist hospitality, was now making worrying headlines in newspapers around the world. But while popular pressure seemed to be winning, the economy was showing warning signs. With the reduction in the number of foreigners, new complaints began to emerge from unexpected sources: factories, fields, transport companies, and hospitals. Without sufficient labor, many sectors began to falter again. Some production lines slowed down. Small farmers who depended on Vietnamese and Filipino workers saw their crops threatened, and nursing homes, where foreigners were the mainstay of care, began to operate at their limit. Amidst all this, public services began to breathe a little easier. Overcrowded schools started to have vacancies again. Popular clinics began to operate with more capacity. Rent in certain neighborhoods stopped rising. For part of the population, this was a real relief, and it further reinforced the idea that the country should continue restricting the entry of foreigners. It was as if the reduction in migratory pressure was bringing back the Japan of the old days, calmer, cleaner, more predictable. But this feeling was only part of the equation. The other part had not yet appeared. Reality hit again when the numbers began to show the invisible cost of the lockdown. The economy slowed down. Projected growth for the year was downgraded. The number of new businesses fell. International tourism, once one of the most important sources of foreign revenue, shrank. And along with it, thousands of jobs linked to hospitality disappeared. Japan found itself in a tight spot. If it opened up too much, the culture felt threatened. If it closed down, the economy threatened to collapse. And this tension created an increasingly difficult impasse to resolve, a kind of historical crossroads. And that's where the next chapter begins. With the country on the brink of turmoil, Japan found itself facing a dilemma that few countries have confronted with such intensity and urgency. On one side, a people clamoring for cultural security, peace in the streets, and a preserved national identity. On the other, an economy desperately needing young hands, brains, and energy to keep breathing. Factories don't operate on their own. The elderly don't take care of themselves. The land doesn't plant or harvest itself. And Japan is discovering this in the hardest way possible. While rejecting foreign presence, it realizes it depends on it more than it would like to admit. The data is clear. With more deaths than births for over a decade, Japan is shrinking. Ghost towns, with abandoned houses, empty streets, and closed schools, are spreading across the countryside. Even in large cities, the lack of young people is causing a silent collapse. Hospitals lack staff to care for patients. Construction sites lack workers to build. And the most paradoxical thing, even with so many requests for help, many qualified foreigners give up on Japan due to fear, racism, or excessive bureaucracy. The country that needs people cannot, or does not want to, welcome those who knock on its door. In communities that still resist change, some celebrate the return of order, with fewer foreigners circulating. But behind the scenes, business owners are desperate. Without people to work, the pace slows down. International competitiveness diminishes. Neighboring countries, such as South Korea and China, are beginning to surpass Japan in productivity and innovation. And yet, nationalist rhetoric continues to grow. With each new election, more candidates adopt the rhetoric of a threatened identity. Nationalism has become an electoral currency, and this leaves the country trapped in a brutal contradiction. It wants growth, but doesn't want to open the door. Schools that welcomed the children of immigrants now face another dilemma: how to maintain inclusion without creating cultural ghettos. In many regions, foreign children are viewed with suspicion by their peers, face bullying, and end up being treated as temporary visitors, even when they were born in Japan itself. This hinders integration and creates a new generation that feels displaced in both cultures. The country that has always prided itself on its social cohesion is beginning to grapple with divisions it doesn't know how to bridge. At the same time, tourism, which was so celebrated as an engine of post-pandemic growth, is now being treated coldly. Empty hotels, guides without clients, restaurants closing their doors. The country, which once sold the world an image of impeccable hospitality, is now desperately trying to control the flow of visitors without appearing hostile. Measures such as entrance fees to tourist attractions, access limitations, and intensive monitoring are being implemented. But all this contributes to the same feeling. Japan is retreating. It is trying to hide from the world, even knowing that this comes at a price. Internationally, the country is beginning to be viewed differently. What was once revered as a cultural and technological powerhouse is now viewed with caution by NGOs, governments, and investors. Growing xenophobia and stricter immigration laws are causing foreign talent to choose other destinations. The image of a safe and welcoming country is giving way to headlines about exclusion, prejudice, and conservatism. And this affects trade agreements, academic exchanges, and strategic partnerships. Within Japan, polarization is growing. Young Japanese people, more connected to the world, are beginning to rebel against the climate of fear and isolation. Many want a more diverse, more creative, more global country, but they face an older conservative generation that fears the unknown and prefers to keep everything as it is, even if it means watching the country slowly sink. And in this invisible tug-of-war, Japan is being stretched between the past it tries to protect and the future it needs to embrace. The big question hanging in the air is, how long will Japan be able to balance this tightrope? The need for adaptation is urgent, but the fear of change is paralyzing. And meanwhile, the world keeps moving. Other countries open their doors, attract talent, build bridges. Japan, for now, is building walls, but perhaps it's just trying to buy time. Time to think, to reorganize, to understand that protecting its identity doesn't have to mean closing its eyes to the world. Perhaps what is happening now is not the end, but a painful transition towards a new model. But for that, courage will be needed, and difficult decisions.